Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Skura. Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Wally.
Morning, Wally.
How's it?
Morning,
Hello.
Sarah. Morning, Kevin.
Morning, all.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Morning, Michael.
How's
Morning,
it?
Mike.
Kevin, how's it? Is the boss
Yeah,
with you?
good. Yes,
Morning,
yes,
everyone.
The boss is here. Yeah, the boss is
Yeah,
here.
good. As long as he gets an eye on you.
You're doing chores there.
Hmm.
Morning, everybody.
Hey,
Morning,
Rod.
Rod.
Nice to see some familiar faces. Mohammed, morning to you. Andre.
Morning, Councillor Bingham. Morning, everybody.
Morning, Mom.
Morning.
I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Morning, Franco. Good to have you.
Hi. Okay, I'm just trying to work out how to get my picture in here.
You've got it. That's it. You're in now.
Am I in?
Yep.
All right. Well, it doesn't show on my computer. Sorry.
Oh, you want to show your picture?
No.
Morning.
Morning, Frank. How's it?
Morning, Franco.
How's it? How's it, guys?
Yes, Laura. Nice to see Alan Orman, who's in the Middle East there.
And me? And me?
Morning, Iqbal.
Well, in my picture.
Morning, Iqbal.
You're famous enough, Iqbal.
After the connections.
Morning, Don.
Okay. Is my picture still not there?
Not yet, Franco.
Sorry, I'm trying to work out. How do I get it on there?
You can try it afterwards. Don't worry about it now.
All right, I won't worry.
As long as you can see Kevin.
Next month is a course for Franco. It's how to get one's picture. So that's what the next session is.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to work out how this thing works.
Yeah. No, as long as you can see Kevin, it's fine for now. Greetings, colleagues. Thank you so much for joining. We will start. Today we have Kevin Bingham sharing his journey in architecture. So I'm just going to introduce him, and then Kevin, the floor will be yours. Kevin Bingham has been deeply involved in the Institute for the past 3 decades. In 1993, former long-serving Saia Kzn executive officer Sylvia Krobler seemingly convinced the then regional committee that they needed a youth committee, and Kevin was duly appointed as its chairperson. This began a series of roles that included work on Institute journals, the construction of Institute display stands at the house and garden shows, ranging architecture competitions, being the University Liaison Committee chairperson, serving on the RegCom and subcommittees, being elected the regional the regional president of Saia Kzn, serving at the Saia board, being elected as Saia National president, and in 2017 being elected to the UIA Council. More recently, in 2019, Kevin was elected to the SciCap 5th Term Council and has been re-elected on the 6th Term Council, having just been announced. Congratulations, Kevin. Kevin is the Managing Director of FGG Architects and a former local full-time academic with teaching stints in Brisbane and Liverpool. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Skura. Just get myself going with the slideshow. Morning to you all, and I want to know that you're all seeing what I'm meant to be showing you. Just bear with me one moment.
Yes, it's shared.
Slideshow from the beginning. Now I need to move this box out the way. Let's go down. Okay, you're seeing my opening slide?
Yes, Kevin. Up here.
Thank you. Okay. Morning to you all, as I said. Thank you to Skura and the regional committee for inviting me to make this presentation. I just thanked Skura before the third time lucky because it's called a journey, one's journey, and I've always held that my journey is not at the end yet. I'd like to feel as though I've still got more journey to go. So I've always kind of hesitated in doing this thing. And then again, I was asked probably just over a month ago to do it, and thinking of titles. 1 month gives you quite a bit of time to think about what you're going to talk about, and more importantly, what you call this damn thing. And so I've had the numerous titles going from Blowing in the Wind to that's the Bob Dylan Blowing in the Wind, to this one that I've got on the screen now. And it's in search of purpose. And it's really a question I ask myself nearly every day. And it's really this opportunity gives you one to reflect on one's life. And when one does reflect, you can see that things that happen in your life early on perhaps influence yourself going forward. And it's up to you to decide how you can make a difference or change things. The second part of the sentence, an attempt at pulling one's weight, was a phrase that when Lynn and I were watching Tom Hanks on A Man Called Otto about 2 weeks ago, and this is part of his letter that he writes that is read after he passes away. So it also gives you an opportunity of wondering whether you've pulled your weight. When I told Skura that I was how do I get rid of this thing at the top? Sorry, going backwards here. Are you able to see the title at the top, or was there a black line at the top?
There's a black line hiding the very first title.
I don't know how to get rid of that thing. Let's go back to this one slide. Yeah, I don't really know how to get rid of that. Okay. Franco, I'm going to be on your course with you, I think, to learn that. Yeah, so anyway, it says at the top, navigating architecture, and really it is a series that talks about my life and journey through architecture. It's a series of meetings and the people that I've met along the way who have all influenced my life, and then also an education, and what I've perhaps learned from it. I've divided the word at the top is about for and off the wind. And you'll see that the talk about wind happens throughout it. I spent a lot of my time on the water. This is my youngest son sailing on the bay in Durban. But the talk is divided really into three things about trying to find wind, because in sailing and in life without the wind, you have no aim or means to move forwards. And so the talk is related to architecture. Skura said I need to have at least 60% of my talk. He got a bit anxious when he saw the sailing references, and I said at least 60% of my talk will have a building in it, somewhere along the line. So the first third of the talk is really about finding wind, and that's finding speech, finding architecture. The second part is about having wind and perhaps too much wind, figuratively that is, and then the last bit of the talk is the unwinds, or onshore unwinds, or unwinds as it's termed. Okay, now I need to move forward. There we go. At the top it says acknowledging the skippers. In our African heritage and tradition, we always acknowledge those that go before us, and this is my mom and dad, Val and Colin Bingham. Val, her parents passed away when she was at junior school, and was taken in by her slightly older brother, who had found himself a building job. She always said she was born on the wrong side of the track. They lived in Mount Vernon, Hillary area, not very much in their upbringing. And she had to go and find a job underage and lie about her age to work in a store in Durban at that time. Her dream for the children was to go and have an education, because she had left school in what was then standard 6, or got to standard 6, and she was very proud of her little standard 6 pass thing. Colin, on the other hand, sorry, she passed away a long time ago. Colin, on the other hand, 91, still lives with me in a cottage just outside the window here. His family moved down to Port Shepstone, having invested in a farm, massive drought, lost all their money, moved back to Glenwood and Durban. And they had to split the children up to stay in various homes. Eventually, they had jobs. My dad had to leave Port Shepstone High in standard 8 with a standard 8 pass and become a mechanic at the BMC in Durban. In my youth years, he worked 4 jobs. He worked in this motor industry from Monday through to Saturday mornings. He worked Friday nights at hot rod racing in Hoy Park. He worked on a Saturday afternoon at horse racing, writing bets, and on a Sunday at soccer on the turnstiles to be able to provide for us. What did I learn from them? Well, hanging in, I think, is the best way to describe it. This is the road that I grew up in. I was born into this house on the right-hand side with a now black roof in Durban North. It was my grandfather's house. He and my grand lived in one room. My folks and I lived in the back room, and my grandmother's sister and her 2 children, having recently lost their father and husband, lived in the 3rd room. Why I'm showing this picture is this was taken this week after work one night. I drove along there. It's empty. There's nothing happening in the street. When I was a child, after work, in the evenings at this time of day, the street would have been full of children playing. We played cricket, soccer, and we hung out in this area. So this was our interspace for our lives, and it's now empty. And it's I don't think my children even knew who their neighbors were. This is my early childhood, going to preschool. I hated school. I disliked school intensely, and this was my preschool class. The story goes that on my first day, when I was dropped off at school, I actually kicked the headmistress. So that didn't go down well and didn't bode well for the rest of my year at this preschool. Then moving on to other years at school, I'm sorry you can't see the top there. It's going back to the story of not liking school. I've written 3 A's here. Age, I think I started school too early. I was just a few days older than 5. Too early compared to those a year or 2 older than me in my year, so there's a bit of a disability there. While I was quite good at academics, I was useless at sport, and this was always played up and brought to me because the picture at the top on the left is my Springbok gymnast cousin, who everyone sort of assumed that I was an excellent at sport as well, which I was absolutely useless at. And I always remember in my high school days of doing the gym sessions and not being able to get from the springboard to the pommel horse. So everyone assumed that I was equally as talented as her. The picture down the bottom is my matric picture, because I speak about ambition, but I had no real guidance in what to do after school. I thought about architecture. My uncle was a draftsman at Tongaat Hewlett. I was taken to his office the one day to see what he did, and while in standard 7, grade 9, we had to choose subjects. I was getting 98 for accounting and probably 78 for geometrical technical drawing, and I ended up choosing technical drawing as a career. So that was my only reference. I put this slide in here. This is going back now in time, because this is a watershed moment for me in my life. This is class 2, or grade 2 as it's now called. Me on the left, next to my teacher, Mrs. Moerdijk was her name. My mother was called to the school one afternoon with me because things weren't going well for me. I was walked from home the kilometre or so to the classroom, and as I walked into the classroom with my mother, Mrs. Moerdijk was there, and I was wearing my school cap, and she hit me across the head. The cap went flying across the room on the other side, and from that day on, I was petrified of school, petrified of her. I never said anything in class. I used to sit there quietly, and I still have the thought of having to read when you go around the class, read a few sentences and move from one to the next. That was my most anxious time in my life. And it actually gave me a kind of a hesitancy with any speech. In fact, when I got through to even high school, I was perhaps the quietest person in the class, having developed a bit of a kind of anxiety thing and having to speak, and kind of stutter, I suppose, would be a way of describing it, although it wasn't actually that. It was really just a seizing up of things. So this was not having wind, and that's what the reference I'm making to wind in this one. So that was class 2, Mrs. Moerdijk. And obviously this is I've thought about this and putting the slide up there because the teacher's name was Moerdijk, and it was before I had learned Afrikaans, and it was before I'd realized that Bongi and Banani could translate from Afrikaans to English as well. And if you look at her name, it's Moer, hits, and Dijk, duck. So if I'd known that at the time when she was about to hit me, I might have ducked earlier and avoided this whole issue in my life. To try and fit in, I found music. This is a picture of me in my upper years, me playing the drums, that is, and I found that fitting in by playing in a band, and this was a kind of a rock band, really, and I played the drums, although I did also play keyboards and a bit of guitar. Right, this is 1976 to 79, having left school, still not having found architecture, although it was the thing that I thought I was going to do. The biggest thing in my life was trying to avoid going to the army. That's the last thing I wanted to do because we had to go and be conscripted in those years. So I chose going to university. A local builder had offered, through my mother, who knew of him or had met this thing in the shop she was working in, he said he would put me through university if I had studied quantity surveying. So unfortunately, my maths marks in matric didn't get me into that course, and I had to write a sup. And so the university student advisor said to me, go and do a year of B-social science. And when I got into the class, I found that most of my matric year were doing the same thing because they probably had the same message. I really loved the law course that I was doing at that time, and thought law might be a more fitting thing because I wasn't really sold on the architecture thing at that time anyway. So I love the law courses, not really doing psychology and English and that. Second year I transferred through to BA and studied law, as I say, under Prof. Sweeney, who the law library is now named after. And then realizing that Afrikaans and Netherlands weren't for me, and Latin really wasn't my scene as well. The army then called me up. Just before I went to the army, this was also more music. So we played, this was a 21st, or we played year-end functions and whatever. You see, I had a bit more hair in those days. Me again on the drums there. Then called to the army, and I thought, should I show the slide or not? Because maybe it's not appropriate in today's times. But again, watershed word comes to me because if I'd gone when I left school, it would have been 1 year. It ended up being 2 years away from me. 6 months in Kimberley, and then sent off to what was called the border. Before going, they offer you opportunities to do various things while you're in the army, and I thought that being a teacher might be a good one for me. So I stood in a queue for many hours waiting to get myself registered to go and teach in rural schools, and lost my nerve as I reached the stage and the counter to put my name down and back down. And I've been told never volunteer for anything when you're in the army, and that's exactly what I did. I backed down. I think my life could have been totally different if I had done that. I may well have been a teacher. So away in the army, went away for 6 months, and I was sent off with a rifle that didn't work. I was given a vehicle very similar to this, but it wasn't the armored one in the front. It was an ordinary Mercedes truck. We were told we were going away for 6 months. I was a heavy-duty driver after having obtained my heavy-duty license for driving about 100 meters in a Bedford, 1953 Bedford. Got my heavy-duty license. After 6 months, they said we were going home, but didn't send us home, and ended up spending 18 months there. But what I'm showing this slide is that the right place or wrong time, or wrong place at the right time, comes into play later in the talk again. And this, every time we went home on a pass, 7 days or 14-day pass, invariably mid-year or end of the year, someone else would come and drive our vehicle. And literally on the 2 occasions that I went home, these vehicles came under fire, and the one driver, this is my co-driver next to me, I'm on the left, were shot in the bum. They were shot through the door and lived, fortunately enough. And the other occasion, there was a landmine involved. So I put that slide in for that. That watershed I mentioned was one of finding architecture and going back to what I originally thought I was going to do, and going to the Technikon Natal and doing the Higher National Diploma for Architectural Technicians. This is my class on the left at a site visit. Apologies for the poor slides. But this is a group of friends that this is 1980. This group has stuck together. Two of them unfortunately have passed away, but this group has stuck together and contact each other almost every week. You will recognize some of the people in it, and one standout person obviously on the left is Luanda Mpatwa, the recent president of Saia. He was on our last exam, on the last day of exams in our T4. He was whisked away to Robben Island and spent a few years there. And when he got out and studied in Germany, he then came back at a later date to graduate at Technikon Natal. And this is him on the left with his late mother. Yeah, and his wife earlier. And this again is our class. Some of you will know Ian Barsley, some of you will know Susan George, and some of you may have studied with Craig Harris, who was 2 or so years behind me at varsity. A good group of people. In my first VAC at doing T1 at Technikon Natal, again, I think it was through my mother who knew someone who knew Don Perks, and Don's on the call this morning. And this is a more recent photo, though, because some of the partners weren't partners at that time, but you'll recognize Ken Howie, Don Perks, Don, hi, and my most recent partner, Jeremy Hawthorne, in the front of the picture here. So I had been studying for 5-6 months. I'd got a job during my July VAC, or June-July VAC, and Don was my boss. My job that I was given, Clinton, this story is for you, was to have to make a model, a polystyrene model of a site in Umhloti. It was a very steep site down to the sea, I think, and we had 15 units on it, and we had to try and fit on a 16th unit. So my job was to create this a model out of polystyrene. I was given a wood glue to try and glue the polystyrene together and pins to hold it together. So duly, each contour was the size of the polystyrene was the right size. I stuck it all together, went home, and the next morning came back to work, and the model hadn't dried. Obviously, the glue was the incorrect glue for it. And Don came into work a bit late that morning and came to the model and took the site plan and told me I was totally wrong in the creation of this model. And he proceeded to rip this model to pieces, the site model. And the glue hadn't dried, and these pieces of contour were sticking onto the walls around where I was. And I was horrified. I didn't know whether to cry, whether I was going to be fired or whatever. And it was my first real thinking about, had I chosen the right career path in this thing. So Don, apologies to you, but this is the story that happened on my first foray in the holidays. So it was a 1-month VAC, and in the last week I had a weekend. I was going out end of the 3rd week, and a drunk driver crashed into my car, and this is the wreck of the car. Obviously some pieces have been removed since the accident, but I ended up in Addington Hospital for 9 weeks in the orthopedic ward in traction, and yeah, so I didn't get to serve the last week of that working holiday in that July after T1. It was interesting going back and doing T2, because I spent the first 9 weeks, as I say, in the hospital bed, or at that time, in traction, and one of the courses was land surveying, and I had to learn land surveying by being given notes by Susan George, who may or may not be on the talk. In 82, I went and joined Campbell Bernstein Irving, the offices up in what was then Ridge Road, Overport. We had 103 of us working in the office, all on drawing boards at that stage. My boss was Thurston Wright, who had done Cabana Beach, Club Mykonos, Santorini, and the job I was working on was Kingsfield Place, which is in Field Street, which you can see the image of here. A young architect who had just recently graduated at that time is the late Philip Thompson, who's been living his last of his life in Cape Town. And he was a mentor to me in the office. And he said to me, why don't you go to university and do the university course? And he said, you should go and do that. You're going to always be stuck doing, in this building I was doing all the bathroom and wall tiling layouts. He said, go to university, I'll arrange an interview for you. And he got hold of Dennis Claude, who got hold of Don Dart Wells, and they arranged the interview for me. And I proceeded to enroll at university. Thurston writes, when I told him, because Thurston didn't go to university, he was a draftsman that was upgraded to an architect, and his words to me were, you don't have to go to university to be a good architect. The pictures on the slide now are my first year at university, 83 to 88. This is my drawing board in the first year. Getting into university was quite an ordeal. I had fees for 1 year, having worked for a year, and I knew that if I didn't do well and get a bursary, I was going to have to work another year and go back again. So I worked my butt off in that year. I was a bit concerned when I saw this slide that I didn't have architectural images on the wall. I had wild animals. So I was wondering whether I was thinking of being a game ranger when I saw these pictures. But anyway, that's my drawing board and my desk at there. First year, Dennis Claude was our year coordinator. I had influences of Kevin McGarry, Colin Savage, Walter Peters, Jem Melville, Jack Simpson, Keith Alcott teaching us art. And as I say, I worked my butt off in that year and was fortunate to get the Marley All-Round Academic Prize, and that's throughout the work in that year. And I managed to arrange a VAC job at the year end with ZAI and applied for their bursary. They had intended giving it to Chandra Lee, I was told, because Brian Lee was her father and Chandra was in my class. And so they gave 2 bursaries that year, one to me and one to Chandra Lee. And I was very fortunate to be able to have them pay my academic fees for year 2 through to the end. This is the picture on the bottom right, is at Dennis Claude's house. You'll see Dennis and Marianne there. There's Chandra Lee. I don't know if Simon's on the call there. He is his arm around someone in the back there. But this was at Dennis's house, and Dennis would always at the year end with his class have a party. So the second year, now working at or being sponsored by ZAI. During the holidays, I had to work there, and we would go to rural hospitals. This is the Benedictine Hospital in Ngoma, and 4 of us would go up there. Lynn, who's my wife now, was one of the 4 staff members that was sent up, and this is, we had measured these hospitals, and the little kids staying in the hospital would shout to us in the morning, "Nango Dokotela, Nango Dokotela," as we would walk past doing our measurements of the building. In third year, I had Peter Stewart and Jesse Burst, and after having cruised through 2 years of architecture, Peter Stewart had it in for me, and he said to me one day at my drawing board, "Kevin, I know one day you're going to be an excellent commercial architect, but I want you to think differently." And he was really hard on me and gave me, my first project was a beach cottage on a cliff face overlooking the sea, and I thought I'd done the best design ever. And he, I think, gave me 57 or something, where I thought it was the first. And so that he kept on at me all year, trying to get me just to think more laterally than what I was. I don't think Jessie Burst ever gave me a crit. I think she was a bit nervous of me, and then always kept passing me by in the studio. And the VAC work I did again with ZAI, and worked with Glanville Jacques, the late Glanville Jacques, on the Durban Expo on the halls. Came prac year, most of my friends were going overseas to work and take the year out, most of them in London. Again, lack of fees, so I worked for the first 6 months with Henny Nell, H.Nell Architects. That's their old offices, 140 Ambela Road. And I loved working there. Henny had a small practice. His son Warren was, I think, 2 years ahead of me at varsity, and I made models. I did watercolor paintings for him. I was quite good at drawing. Well, I thought I was quite good at drawing perspectives and constructing these. And in fact, most of my, looking back at my university work, I'd always throw in a hand-drawn perspective. So this was a project up in what was then called Zululand, I suppose. It was a shopping center in Ulundi, and then this was the Durban North Post Office, which had to be designed to be bomb-proofed, and hence its harsh exterior with bulletproof glass on the outside. After having saved enough money in those 6 months, I caught a flight over to London to join my friends Alan Orman, who's on the call this morning, and Simon Pratt, and a few others who were all in the UK at that time. And we weren't allowed to work in the UK unless you worked through an agency, and I managed to get a job through this company, which was called George True Dunn, and changed its name to GTD Partnership. And this office was a 3-level office. You're only seeing 2 there, but there was another level at the back. And that was in Richmond, West London. The project I was given and employed for was a 4-week project to do the drawings of an existing hall in Orpington, which is in the Bromley area of London, existing hall, and adding a new hall down the bottom here. And I worked with one of the partners to prepare drawings. We were only allowed to draw in pencil. Everything was in pencil. And having initially learned that in my T1 course to draw in pencil, it was quite an ordeal keeping your drawing from smudging and also keeping your pencil sharp and learning to roll your pencil all over again. So this is the existing hall that you're seeing. That's the new hall with its elevations, sections and roof plan, and then the perspective views that were part of the project. When it got to the end of the 4-week contract period, they said I could stay on for a while because Simon, Alan, and I had decided that we were going to buy a camper van and travel around Europe to do what we had learned about in history of architecture with Prof. Bierman. Wally taught us the history as well in first year. So we wanted to go and see the buildings that we had been. So this is just a picture of inside the office, one of the guys in front of me, and we all worked on drawing boards. There was a computer room in the basement, but I think 3 computers, and it was really early days for computers. This is a slide. Simon Pratt actually drew this onto a slide, and this was a talk we had to do at Natal University at that time when we returned. So we had to go and present what we were going to do on our tour to Dondyke Wells, which I did before leaving, and get his nod on us going. So that was Simon's slide. Simon arrived back to our residence one day having bought this van for us. That's Simon on the right. Her name was Dorothy. This is what the 3 of us traveled around Europe in 9 weeks for. I kind of ran out of money part of the way along. We lived on absolutely nothing. Almost at one stage, we were eating dog food. I can remember going into, I think, a Spar type store and us looking at the cans of dog food and then walking out on that occasion with a can called, when we did the translation from German afterwards, it was actually sour lungs, pigs, trotters and things. So I lost an incredible amount of weight on that 9-week tour. This is where we went. We left London. We went up through Belgium, to Amsterdam, and we went to what was then East and West Berlin. A very interesting time. I could give you a full talk on that. And then drove back out of East Germany, down through, and you'll see the list of places on the left-hand side there. Some beautiful places, and again visiting the places that we learned about in history of architecture, and also being guided by one of the partners in my practice who had studied at Wits. Freddie Stain was his name, and he wrote a list of places that no one would have ever dreamt going to, and he wrote it in fountain pen. I think I still have that. So we went all the way down to Greece. We went to Olympia. We went to Delphi. Alan, remember Delphi? And then around Amalfi Coast up through Rome, Pisa, Siena, and all those places, and then down to Barcelona, and then having some wine in Bordeaux, and then back through Paris and back to London. That was our 9-week tour. This is us here. Marcus Aurelius is somewhere up above there. Myself and Alan on the steps there. This is at the top of Brunelleschi's dome in Florence. Simon and I, we decided to try a hand at skiing, so we went to Innsbruck and found out that we could ski just outside Innsbruck on a glacier called the Stubai Glacier. We parked our van here for 3 nights and camped the van anywhere. It was minus 15 degrees the one night when we camped here, and we had that pop-top roof, and that night, the last night, we couldn't keep it up. It was just so cold. This is us skiing. Everyone was rigged up for skiing other than us in our jeans. So good memories of that. That's Simon and I in Pompeii. yeah, just some memories. And this is in the Villa Savoy in Southside Paris. Obviously, we had to keep notes because when we got back from doing the Grand Tour and back to Varsity, we had to give the talk to the school. And this is me sitting in the van one evening with Rattles, the cat that had befriended us, and me writing up my diary. So we'd have that. This is fourth year architecture. You see the well-known Ted Tolman, Dolph and Zale. There's Alan and Simon again. Faces you might recognize, as Ruben Reddy in the back. The Karuni, I think, is here. Kathy Holt, whose name comes up later in the talk, myself, Barry Denny, Bruce Clark. Anyway, yeah, you can look at these on your own. Fourth year, we went with Wally. Wally, you again feature. There he is with his son, I think it was, before we went and did the roads report. This was the conservation group that went and studied the elective of conservation down there, and it was a really meaningful trip. And Wally will know that when I became an academic after that, we went and did a revisit of that town. This is final year, just walking back to the car park and gathered a few that were standing around to take a photograph. The agreement I had with my wife, Lynn, who was my girlfriend at that stage, was that when I completed the degree, we go back to London, and where she worked at Chapman Taylor, I went back to GTD again. I worked on the Princess Anne Hospital in Southampton. And why I've chosen this picture, it links back to what I was saying about being useless at sport. I never played cricket at school. And when they heard I was South African, they all mentioned names like Barry Richards and Eddie Barlow and Mike Proctor. So they put me in as opening batsman. The firm used to play cricket on a Wednesday evening against other practices. Well, I was soon moved down from opening batsman, but I wasn't able to avoid having to play. Our agreement, Lynn and our agreement, was we'd work again and then travel again. And this was our camper van that we had then. And we again traveled around Europe again. I think this was for 8 or so weeks. And Lynn didn't want to go up north. So we went through and went to Vienna. And this stage, we went through Switzerland. We went down through Greece and spent a week on, unbeknown to us at the time, a nudist beach on the island of Santorini, and then again drove much the route that we had done. Ellen and I and Simon and I had done, but we went through to Granada, Cordova, and up through. So again, you'll see the names of the places down the left-hand side. That's Lynn in the back of our camper van one evening. When we spent a year there and came back, this is now 1990. I had to go and work back my years at ZAR, who unfortunately never had much work at the time. So during that year of not really doing much in the first few months, I got a phone call from Brian Bernstein early in 91, I think it is, or maybe been 90, where he said to me that he is inviting Cindy Walters and myself to go and work on a project on the Victoria Embankment in Durban. And the top left of the screen is a very poor image of that proposal. Cindy turned down the offer. I went and worked for Brian from 91 to 93. That scheme never went ahead. It was mainly people involved in our institute that put a stop to it. And then I met Sylvia Grobler, as Skura mentioned. She got me to be the youth chairperson on the committee. Brian Johnson was the president at the time, and I sat in those meetings with Wally, with Ted Tolman, John Frost, Pat Gibson, and as was mentioned, used to prepare the stand for the House and Garden Show. In 93, CBR were starting to retrench. I was lucky to be kept on, and I was serving with Pat Gibson, who was then the president of the Institute, and he said, "Why don't you come and work for us?" And that's what happened. 93 to 96 worked on Edge of the Sea, which you'll see here. I worked on that back block and this phase 2 block on the bottom right, and then worked on Jeremy Hawthorne and I worked on the lab block at the Albert Luthuli Hospital, while the rest of the firm were all allocated other parts of the hospital. In 94, 95, I was nominated to the regional committee, but what didn't manage to get on, wasn't voted on, but was co-opted on. And in 96, Rodney Harbour phoned me in the office one day and said to me, did I know anyone that wanted to come and teach with him in the studio building technology in the Tata afternoons? And I said, Rodney, are you phoning to ask me, or are you phoning other people? And he said, well, he didn't mind whoever it was, but did I know anyone? So I said, well, I'll come along and do it. And that's exactly what happened. And during that time, I was approached by, I think, Dennis Radford and Kelly Aspinall, saying there was a vacancy. Did I want to join the university full time? Long story short is that's what happened. 97, went and joined the academic staff. These are some of the students in these various years. You'll see Paul Sanders down the bottom over here, one of our good friends. Dennis Radford, the head of school, to the right. Again, just images that the students really give us. This was one this year gave us the photograph with the name signed in it. Yeah, just flipping through. This was my final year of teaching, 2007. We went on a field trip to Johannesburg and Pretoria. Then Dennis Radford had said to me in my first year, we used to sit and have tea together. Him, Derek Wang and myself used to have tea in the tea room most often, and said, you have to do some research. What interests do you have? And I said, well, I've always done hospitals wherever I've been. I've measured up hospitals. I've done hospitals in London. And so maybe something in that field would be good. So I did quite a bit of research. And when I went to the Durban Health Department, they said, we have a lot of research done on clinics. So why? But there's no research done on AIDS. And so I then fell into doing research on AIDS and architecture. Rodney Harbour and I prepared AIDS briefs for architects. And the second line is a publication that Ellen Whiteside put together. Dennis Radford actually very kindly gave me some of his research funding to fly to Manchester to present a paper at the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors on AIDS and Architecture. There's a publication in Wally's Journal, these listed below. I went to an exchange program and taught in Brisbane in Design 3 and Interior Design 1. Presented a paper at the 13th International AIDS Conference in Durban in 2000, and then taught for part of a semester in Liverpool University, and took the first year students, on a field trip to Glasgow. These are images of the KZN journal where these publications are. Wally had got me to be the guest editor for this edition on AIDS and architecture. You'll find it's been scanned, and you can find it if you do a search. And during that time, I did outreach projects for Highway Hospice, mainly involving shipping containers, where we got those onto the sites of clinics or hospitals, where we put up a little admin block, a waiting area on the outside over here, a consulting room with one or two beds inside it, and then on the lower image, you'll see this little outdoor area with Ntingus and that, and eventually some sheeting over. And I did those in Ananda, in Umlazi, and in Chesterville. Rodney had also put me in contact with McCord Hospital, who were looking to do some work for AIDS, and Dr. Helga Holtz got me on board to eventually convince the owner of this house at the top of McCord Road to sell it to the hospital. And I spent much time with the owner of that house, who was a sailor as well. And we eventually bought the house, and then I designed this block at the back. This is the wall that's outside. It exists still, and the street where the wall is down the bottom that Jane Durant did and put a team together to do the mosaics. And this is Elton John down the bottom, who came to open the centre. During that time at Varsity, I ran some private practice as well. This is Waza up in the Moy River area. You'll see it as you go through the toll plaza there. It's falling to pieces at the moment, but they're trying to upgrade it with restaurants and things. And the builder worked so hard on this project, and I think he invested his own money in it because there was very little municipal money. And this is a detail we did of that stair going up. I'd also had a developer who worked with me, and some of my students helped out in doing 3D renders. This is in Simbiti, the there were 32 units in a block. I think the first block, or one of the first blocks that were given up. And this is it over here. It's called Imoyeni. And we did those. And when I got through to 2007, which was my last year of teaching, I was initially employed to only do 4 unit types, and unfortunately the purchasers and whatever, when they sold off the drawings, they sold off the plan types and just placed them on any site really. So I remember an architect friend who's now immigrated saying to me, just bought your unit, but this big glass window and it's facing west. It was one of these houses over here, and I said, but that one wasn't designed for there. And so you live and learn as you go along. And we had to not just do 4 unit types, we had to do a unit type for each, or a drawing for each site. And in 2007, in my last year of teaching, when we were so short-staffed, we had 32 units coming online for occupation certificates. It was the hardest year of my life, without question. I was, for probably 2 weeks, I was getting 3 hours sleep a night, trying to mark student work and trying to get, so it wasn't really working that well for me. And this is a project I did with Do and Barbara van Zyl, now residents in New Zealand. Do and Barbara were emigrating. It's Kwame's school up in the Hammersdale area. Mpumalanga is the actual name of the area. Really nice school. Do and Barbara did the design, and with them emigrating, they'd asked me if I'd do stages 5 and 6. It was through Itala Bank. Itala Bank wouldn't have a main contractor. They broke up the contracts into a plumbing contract, electrical contract, a wet works contract, and myself, the quantity surveyor, and to an extent the structural engineer, actually ran the project, and we were on site more often than you could imagine. We went through 6 plumbers, the first of whom laid the plumbing uphill. Really enjoyable projects to work on. As I mentioned, 2007 was another watershed year for me, and I was trying to get out of the university. I don't know if Ambrose is on the call, he'll remember this well. I tried to resign. They asked me to stay on for another 6 months. I had quite a bit of practice work I was going to do, but loved academia and applied in 2007 for a job as academic leader of architecture at the University of Plymouth. I was interviewed, got the job, and then the family said to me, we've never been to Plymouth, shouldn't we go there first? So I had to turn down the job. They re-advertised it, and we went across in the July of that there to look at Plymouth at the university. They re-advertised, and they moved the date of the interview to the date we were flying back home again. So they said, well, they can't move it for me. So that job fell away. And shortly after that, I applied for the head of school job at the University of Portsmouth. Again, went through the interview process and was given the job. When I approached the family, the Kelton, who's listening in to this recording now at the moment, they said to me, we don't want to go to Portsmouth. Kelton's words to me were, have a nice life. And so I didn't go, and I had to break the news to them. They were so angry with me that I wasn't going. They said, we'd pay for you to come back twice a year. We'd pay for the family to relocate. Didn't happen. We never went. So that would have been a different life for me, I think. I joined FGG again because Ken Howie had heard I was leaving the university, phoned me and said, we've got a big hospital to do in the Eastern Cape. We'd like you to run it. He was retiring at the stage. So I then went and joined FGG Architects, where I'm still at. And this was beginning of 2008. During that year, Wally Peters called me and said, Kevin, you've been working on this master's now for a number of years. You haven't had time because you've been teaching in all these years and doing all these courses. Wally was my master's supervisor. He said, you're so close to this thing. Let's meet and let's get this thing completed. And that's exactly what happened. And through Wally's guidance, cutting out all the waffle that I'd put in, we narrowed the whole thing down, got it in, and I ended up, thanks to Wally, with a master's degree at the end. During my time at FGG, this is, you'll see 2013 on here, yeah, I'd seen an advert, I think through Pretoria University and maybe the Pretoria Institute of Architects, advertising for anyone interested in medical research and architecture research through the architecture department at Pretoria. Long story short is I applied. 3 of us from South Africa got it, and I think there were 5 kind of studentships, as it were. We were sent on a course at Pretoria University involving airborne infection control for a week-long course, and then they said, "We're sending you off to Harvard to do a 10-day course there." It was a two-week-long course, so they flew us off to Boston. Jaco Nice, who was a past student of mine, who now has recently just left the CSR, was with me, yeah, so it's 3 of us from here went over and did the course. And during the course, we had to break up into groups. My group was called Breath, which you'll see it was based on the word building response environments, addressing tuberculosis healthcare, because already was dealing with TB and infection control in hospitals. And this was a design that I came up with, and there was no air conditioning, and I used the Venturi effects and being able to get air to pass through. And this is a site in India that they gave us. Linked to that research, back in South Africa, we did research, and we were given 2 hospitals on the Cape Flats to do. This is Sonia Milanova, a Russian American, who was part of that course in Boston, and her and I did testing on one of the hospitals. We used CO2 monitors and placed them at various in various rooms and spaces, and got nurses to walk around with these to take readings of carbon dioxide. And the purpose of that was to see ventilation in the hospital. So it was 2 hospitals, and Jaco and another person went and did the other hospital. I'm not going to mention the names of the hospitals, you might recognize it. And then we did the readings, and the spikes were seen as to where there was poor ventilation based on the buildup of carbon dioxide, obviously from people in the spaces. It was a critical learning exercise, and the long and short of the findings was that the most dangerous place to be in for the poorest ventilation happened to be in the staff fatigue rooms. Yeah, this is us at FGG. This picture's a bit old. It was taken a year or so ago, and I put it in there because we have had some students. We like to have students in the office. We're based in Umhlanga now, and that's just a picture of the staff. Our current website shows us all as looking like this, and an incredible team of people we're very proud to work with. The way I work in the office is generally trying to get the associates in the office to lead the various projects, and for me to be their guide, really. And that's the way I see my role in this, to be able to build them up to be leaders amongst themselves and leaders in the firm. So very proud to be a part of that team. Just going to show you some of the work that we're doing, current projects. I'm not going to go over all of them, but this is when I had been playing in the band and playing in my parents' garage at night. The next door neighbors and that used to complain about the drums and the music on a Friday evening band practice. So I learned a bit of acoustic installation at that time, putting egg crates up around inside the garage. I eventually ended up teaching the acoustic for architecture course when I was at UKZN, because the electronics department no longer were able to teach it. So the professor Broadbent emigrated, and I took over teaching it. So acoustics has always been a big thing for me, one in the music realm, and then also we do quite a lot of work at the Durban Playhouse and at the SABC. So we're currently working on radio studios. Clinton in the office is leading this project at the moment. So these are 2 recording studios that we're hoping to implement in the new year. Steve in the office is leading the Mauritian work at the moment, some residential apartments and villas in Vlek in Mauritius. And this is Janine in the office, linked with Jeremy Hawthorne, who continues, even though retired, to put so much effort into our firm with his son Patrick. This is a project we're doing up in Howick. It's called Angel's Care. It's a trauma center, a crisis center, and a little preschool. This is a heritage building which we got a MAFA approval on doing some renovations to. Alan, one of our associates based in our Maritzburg office, put this project up some time ago. Janine has been, and her team have been painting the murals on this wall, and this is a new 6 classroom block that we have are implementing. It's 26 minutes past. Skura, don't fret, I'm nearly there. This is just some images of the courtyard.
No, it's good, Kev, don't worry.
Thanks.
We're good, yeah.
This is just some images of the courtyard area. There will be kind of Belgatexi type carpeting and landscaping going down with the kiddies play area in there. Janine and Jeremy, as I say, have been really the leaders in this project in the office. This picture was taken, I think, this week. So the kids are moving in to school in January. So let's hope it all falls into place. This project was born through Kathy Holt, who was in my university. I mentioned her in the Dennis Claude photo a bit earlier on. Kathy is both an architect and academic, now resident in Brisbane in Australia, and she was at school with a lady that runs this organization, also who was also a former academic at the Pietermaritzburg site, Ku Hancock, and she got hold of Kathy. Kathy said she knows me, and so FUG are doing the project or implementing the project. The initial conceptual design was done in Brisbane in Australia, trying to be as green and earthy as one could, but the reality of it is that some of the timbers or recycling stuff that were being used, just we are not up to speed in this country to achieve all of the greening that we were hoping to do. So just some images from that courtyard. The paint was sponsored. A lot of the stuff has been sponsored, actually. We sponsored all of the fees, so we haven't earned a cent on this project. We have struggled to get the client to agree on these trusses that we put in. They wanted a heavy laminated beam. The paint's been given to us by the Plascon. Jeremy and had spent hours trying to come up with light fittings and made light fittings at home. These were actually bought ones because we didn't go for those ones eventually. But yeah, so a lot of effort's been put into this. These tiles on the bottom are given to us and the school by Kalki, the ceramics, who you may have heard of, and they're very involved in the institute as well. And these were kind of tiles that they weren't using anymore. And so the patterns you're seeing on the floor, Janine and others have been and laid these out to try and see what volumes of different colors there are. These were to go into the bathroom areas. And so knowing how many bathrooms and ablutions there are, these have been batched in certain numbers. And as you can see, those, as I mentioned, are from the Kalki ceramics, and that's what's going on. So everyone's played a role in this in some way or other. The bricks were donated by the Cora Brick. And you can see the work that's gone into the outside. The builder, Rob Waugh, and his team, really incredible team, the neatness in which they've created. These are the ablution blocks on the corner, and this is ventilation into the block. There's another screen wall inside there that ventilates through these areas. There's perforations in each of these blocks. We can see the Cora Brick, black bricks there, and the detailing you'll see at the bottom of the wall over here. So quite a lot of effort has gone into that. This is just an interlude quickly on my time spent at the Institute, and I've put at the top there, being on port when meant to be on starboard. It links back to what I said earlier about being in the wrong place at the right time or right place at the wrong time. But the top of the line there says Institute President 13 to 15. I got into the committee again in 2012, I think it was. Nina Saunders called me the one day and said, meet me for coffee. I want to talk to you. I went along and met her opposite Mitchell Park, and she said, Barty, our vice president, is emigrating. Will you be the vice president? So out of the blue, I became the vice president of the KZN Institute, went on to become the president, serve on the Saia board. I when I finished my term as KZN president, Ruben Reddy took over from me as the KZN president, and it was his first board meeting that he was to attend. And he was over in Russia at the time doing a presentation, I think, on a soccer stadium. And so he had gone off over to Russia, and on the day of the Saia board meeting, he was flying back, and he asked me to stand in for him. I saw no agenda. I arrived at the meeting, and at that meeting, Sindeli was the president, and he had, I think, served 2 terms as president. On the agenda was the voting in of the next president. So they duly put my name on the list, and I said, "You can't put me there. Ruben is the representative. I'm just sitting in for him," and I eventually got my name taken off the nominees. And long story short is that Ruben turned that down because he was the KZN president. There was an election, and then I was then voted in as the Saia national vice president, becoming the president thereafter. So it was really being in the right place at the wrong time? I'm not sure. I went on to serve on the UIA Council for 4 years, 17 to 21, served on their committees, which was their practice commission, working on documentation on dispute resolution. You can find that documentation, or I could send it to you. I served on the public health group and headed up their COVID-19 information hub that exists on the UIA website. You can look at, and I continue to serve on the UN Habitat Professional Forum. In fact, we had a meeting this week, and the bottom picture is us in Rio, setting up for the Rio 20 whatever it was Congress, and the top was us in Egypt for one of the board meetings. Looking ahead and off, and younger pictures of me. I spent a lot of time on the phone. This is looking forward and after. This is, as Skura had said, I've now served on the 5th term council. It's one of the disadvantages of being tall. You're always at the back of the picture. And I've just again been re-elected onto the SACAP council. I served the past term as the education chair and recognition of prior learning chair. And it's recognition of prior learning is very close to my heart, and having spent 10 years with Wally's help to achieve the master's, research master's, and having spent 4 years on a diploma, and then 6 years at Natal University studying. My heart goes out to anyone that didn't choose or weren't guided in the correct way, or didn't have the funds to be able to study and go and do the course that they should have done from the outset. So I'm very passionate about trying to find means for people of doing continuing professional development, or finding ways of recognizing what their learning has been. So RPL and CPD are very close to my heart, as is education. So we'll see what I do in the next term of office, the next 4 years. This year have been elected as the advisor to the Canberra Accord. For those that don't know, the Canberra Accord, it's an agreement that was signed in Canberra in 2008, implemented in 2010, which between signatory countries or registration bodies there allow people with a master's degree, the 5-year degree, that is it enables the portability of that degree to the other signatory countries. You don't have to run through a whole series of hurdles to do it. We're currently in talks or looking at talks with the ARB in the UK, and other countries, and some South American countries, and also Pakistan is hoping to come on board as well. So yeah, so these meetings are held annually, and I have monthly meetings, 1-hour meetings. Yeah, that's I'm now the advisor. This last meeting was in Hong Kong. This picture is in Hong Kong actually, earlier this year, and the next meeting is online next year, and the one after is in Japan. I'm trying to do research every year, publications. This is the 2021 publication that Jenny Porter, those of you that taught at university will know Jenny Porter, who ran the Computer Land, very good writer, who and I put together this SACWA bulletin, which would look at the preparedness of Master of Architecture graduates for the fourth term industrial resolution. We did it in 21, and I presented the paper at an online congress. This 2022 one is work that I did with an American called Lance J. Brown. And this is the background report. There's a longer report for the I mentioned that I serve on the UN Habitat Professionals Forum, and this document's actually well worth a read in its entirety. It's a lot about town planning, but Lance and I did the architecture section. This year, based on this Angels Care project that we're doing in the office, again with Kathy Holt and Carolyn Hancock, we had this paper presented by Kathy at the in Copenhagen at the UA Congress, and this is just the first page of the paper we did there. Architects for Angels, the power of a cause. I'm hoping to do one. Skura, this is for you, this slide. Skura runs the Comrades and is a good runner. These are my unwinds or unwins, just getting out of the win story. I used to run the Comrades when I was able to. Now I have a more sedate role in being the event director of the Mhlongo Park Run. So my role is to make sure it happens every week. This is me being the run director on a day, megaphoning the crowd. I've done 280 runs myself, and this is my 250th run some time ago. As I said earlier, I spent a lot of time on the water. I'm a national race officer for national and provincial sailing events. Member of Point Yacht Club. I'm actually a trustee of the yacht club, and this is me out on the water for one of the events, pressing hooters, waving flags. I used to be the chairman of the KZN, South African Sailing, and this is me doing the opening cruise, the salute that's done at the opening of each of the sailing seasons. My youngest son sailing the Lipton Cup in Cape Town. It's a shame you can't see these images. And this is my two sons, Kelton, who I think is listening, visiting us from Australia this week, and next, and Trent, my two sons, sailing on Minmar Dam, that is. I've been awarded Protea colours as for sailing management. Lynn, my wife, and I took the youth team of the Optimus class, this class over here, top left, across to Napier in New Zealand in 2011, 2012. And as their manager, I was awarded Protea colours. Two photos of my son sailing at the top. And this is in search of purpose. I found my purpose. This is my family. Trent on the left, who lives in this country, still resident in South Africa. Kelton, who is a chartered accountant now in Sydney, Australia, who's, as I said, is visiting us for 2 weeks and I think is online. Myself and Lynn, my wife, who has put up with all this bull from me for so many years. She's my stabilizer. As you can see, I would have fallen over if she wasn't holding me up. And all credit goes to her, really. She's put up with me for so long. At the top, which you can't see, it says it's not about the journey or something. It's about the whatever. I can't remember the wording that I had on there. It's a shame you can't see that. So this is us going away last year. Kelton again was visiting, and we went away for a few days, and that was us there. Thank you. That's a reflection. I hope I've done well with time. 8:40. Thank you, Skura. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you, sir. I think that was very, very interesting and very, very inspiring. I always tease Kevin whenever he posts one of his sons for his birthday. Are you not worried that they look so much better than you, Kevin? And then I see that perhaps you did look you were a looker yourself in your time, perhaps, Kev, when you were still in the band. Thank you, Kevin, and congratulations on being re-elected on the Saia Kzn council again. I'd like to acknowledge a lot of people that have joined us for the first time this morning. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Past President Hassan Asmal on the log. Well, I saw another former Saia president who was also my neighbor, who are now we estranged now. I don't know what happened. Mr. Reddy is also here. Welcome everyone. Kevin, I wanted to find out, do you feel that being I saw your correlation with designing the studio at Ukozi FM and you playing in a band, then your sensitivity or awareness to acoustics. Do you feel that architects should definitely be people who look beyond their profession to be wholesome designers or to be wholesome human beings to be able to tackle projects correctly? Because I note that in your life, you've managed to straddle quite a lot of things at the same time. How can you say that has made you a better architect? And what's your advice for us as far as that is concerned?
Thanks, Gura. As mentioned earlier, I think all these learnings that you experience in your life, it's for you to open your eyes to realizing that they're there to teach you something or to show you something. As I mentioned in those radio studios earlier, Clinton's been leading the job, and him and I have worked quite well together on that. And I'm trying to build him up to be the acoustics person in the office. It is something, all of these are experiential things. The band playing the music and that, and now having had the speaker next to my ear over here for all those years of loudness, I can't hear so well. So that was a learning experience that I didn't take heart on at the time. But so the studios and that, we spent a lot of time conceptualizing them, and what's not shown on those slides is really the thought that went behind what's those two stations are really about, one being an Indian influence and one being an African influence. So it's not things that necessarily are close to my heart or things that I know about. So, and also not necessarily so with Clinton. So obviously he would have had some Indian influence or background, I think. But so learning from those and us doing research, and we spent weeks and weeks drawing on those influences and coming through there. So thinking broad on what there is, for me, it's like I have this unfortunate habit of putting my hand up for anything. So if I think there's a good cause for something, almost certain I'm going to be there. So I can't say no to anything that involves a meeting, that involves a cause, as I say. So I think the learning, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think the learning experiences are there for us every day, and we just need to be cognizant so that they're trying to teach us things. And as I said, for me, having spent all these years in being a student, as it were, and now recognizing how can I give back and help or guide others who are maybe going down the wrong path. And I spend a good part of my month of people contacting me asking what should I do about this, and still trying to help those that haven't been successful in recognition of prior learning to find ways to go back and be a student again now that we have part-time courses at and others. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kev. Thank you to a lot of people who have been mentors. I think you mentioned Don Pex and other people that you've worked with. The Angels Cave, Kevin, and working with Colbrick, who, as the institute, we've worked very closely with for a long time. At the moment, we are working on an agreement with Slum Dwellers International, or FedUp. It's a federation for urban poor. It's a group of it's an organization that focuses on doing, if you like, RDP houses, but from private investors, mostly people who give money from their own pockets. Usually the government comes in once the project starts, etc., etc. In bridging the situation in South Africa, where you have delivery, you have to have service delivery from government, and then at the same time, the needs, I think, of society exceed the level or the speed of delivery by government. Therefore, how important is it for the architects to see themselves as a nation builders? Because I mean, that project, Angels Cave, I'm really really looking forward to seeing it complete. How important for the architect to see themselves as nation builders, because you would have spent so much time. You can see that there's so much consideration in the detail in the project. You have to mobilize, you have to, in terms of sponsorship, you have to speak to people. How important is it for us to see ourselves as nation builders, and not just only leave it up to government, but we also proud South Africans that we must make sure the country works.
Yeah, I think we do see ourselves as nation builders, and it takes convincing government and municipal leaders that we are nation builders and have those skills. So I know there's now in this recent times there's a strong bond happening between public works in the national office and the SACAP Council. So for the first time, I think there's acknowledgement that architects do play this role. It's always been engineers that have been leaders on this, and you and I, Skura, have had this discussion, and there's been work groups on this with Mike Bull and others as well. So I think we see ourselves as that. I think there is a transitioning happening in that regard where value is given to architecture. But going back to the Angels Care thing, I think I don't know. I mean, we've spent, when you correlate the fees that could have been charged on a project like this and the time spent in the office like that, I don't think many a small practice would have been able to give up all that time. So I would recommend starting small, and the work that I initially did, and I was benefited by being a paid academic at that time, although the pay was poor. It was to be able to do outreach work, to get involved in an interest that you have. And my interest happened to be the hospice, the base of Highway Hospice in Sherwood and Durban. And they would contact me often, and I'd go out and do this outreach program. So it was where I kind of learned, and it was small, and trying to get container conversions to buy in and donate and convert without costing and that. So starting small, I think, was it. And then now that we've got to this big project, and having someone like Janine in the office who thrives on this excitement of getting sponsors, I think, and doing this type of work, and input, as I mentioned earlier, of Jeremy, who's very inventive and creative, and many of those details that you see are his input as well. So this is a pro bono, but it's a love for giving back, I think, and recognition. In this case, that Angels Care is for care of abused and needy children, and it's a preschool. Yeah.
Kev, one of your slides where you showed your works at HJ Nell, the bottom picture that you didn't comment on, was that the office building?
Yes, it's the office. It's still there. I think Pronto Prints occupy the building now, or whatever. So it was an incredible work environment. Henny had designed. I don't know how many of the people online now would have been there, but it was built around a courtyard. So all your drawing boards, and we had one SCOC computer at that time in the office, but everyone sat looking or side on to a courtyard, a well-planted courtyard, and you could open the sliding doors and be in the garden almost, as it were. So it was a kind of a Pompeian villa that you were in, and you had wonderful lights, wonderful greenery inside there, and a man that knew how to look after his staff and treat you as one of his children in guiding you forward. I learned an incredible amount in those half year working for Henny.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Kev. It's always good to have people who've been around them, and then every now and then you see this striking building and you wonder what's the history behind it. I had noticed this building in Milo before, and I did not know the history behind it. The floor is open for questions and comments to Kevin and everyone. Adima?
Thanks, Gura. Thanks, Kevin. How's it, everybody? I think first, just to say, like many others, Kevin, that we're all really grateful that it's been really windy at the Bingham residence. But just real sincere thanks for your search for purpose. And I think that you've already found it, that your search for purpose is actually your service. And so just as I was just reading Ruben's comment now, just as Ruben has alluded to, I think just absolute gratitude, and it's been such a love your journey and recognizing how many people echo the same shared sentiments about your capacity to demonstrate servant leadership. And something that really sticks with me is a conversation that you had and with me in a very challenging time with the Institute. But looking at your presentation and hearing you talk today is recognizing the value that of your lived experience through it. And that's the fact that experience and skill and enthusiasm all have an equal place at the table. And so just thank you for demonstrating that. And thank you for having a mullet and that moustache. It's a real look. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Skura.
Thanks, Adema.
Any other comments?
There's a question that Ruben asked. He wants to know what did I wear on the nudist beach in Greece. Well, it was interesting. We never had funds to stay in campsites, so we'd often stop anywhere along the road. This is Lynn and I'm talking about now. And we happened to be and stop at this beach. And so it was night time. We got out our horrible Greek wine and we cooked our meal and went to bed that night, right next to the sea, in fact, on the beach, on the road next to the beach by the airport. And in the morning, I heard talking outside and opened the curtains and saw these naked people walking past. So out with the long camera lens, obviously, and taking pictures. But no, we didn't go nude on the beach. Lynn was half nude, I suppose. Yeah, so there are pictures of us which I wasn't going to include in the talk in our swimwear.
Actually, Kevin, I want to find out how easy was it to travel country to country in Europe back then. I know that you would have probably tried a range of visas ahead of time. I mean, sometimes you get into a country, all your papers are in order, and the people just have to question you. How easy was it to just go through countries like that?
So I'll go back to what I was saying earlier about getting into the UK. It was a scary thing going. I have a South African passport. I've married a woman with an Irish passport, and so for me to get into the UK and not being allowed to work because they would search your bags. The story was to see if you had anything that made it look like you were going to try and find a job. And luckily, I wasn't searched and got through. And as I mentioned, got employment through an agency who were very good to me and helped me with all my time working. And so you were allowed to go that route. You couldn't just go and apply for a job. Going back to your question of traveling around Europe, we're thinking of doing that again, of getting a camper van and that. And I'm a bit hesitant now because I think the world has changed a lot. Or maybe we were young and innocent and maybe foolish in those days. So in the time that Alan and Simon and I drove around in Dorothy, the camper van, we went through border posts. As I mentioned, we went into East Berlin as well, to the Pergamon. We went through Checkpoint Charlie, and that was an interesting experience because you weren't allowed to take money out with you afterwards. So we could get in on our South African passports. We went to the Pergamon art gallery, and then we had to spend all the money that we had then before coming out, or leave it at the border post. So we went out for a meal at a restaurant, and Alan, who I see is online, will remember that we bought food and then we still had a lot of money left. So we went back, I think, 3 times to get food just to try and spend the East German money that we had. On the way out, back through Checkpoint Charlie, Ellen and I got out fine, but they grilled Simon. And so the two of us were standing in West Berlin and Simon stuck in East Berlin. And Ellen and I were debating on how we were ever going to get Simon out again. And obviously there were images in our minds of these people being put into the bottom of cars and climbing over walls and things like that. So fortunately, we only waited about an hour before they released Simon. So driving through the various countries on our passports was relatively easy. We weren't hassled at all. When Lynn and I went a few years later, Lynn was an Irish passport, and we used to lie the Irish passport on the dashboard of the camper van. And I think that the border post people all thought that we were Irish and that we didn't have much between our ears, perhaps, and they just kind of waved us through often without even asking for my passport. Not all the time, but yeah, so it was quite easy then. Yeah, so I don't know about now, but this is something that we're thinking of doing again.
Different times, guys.
There you go. I'll have Mohammed. Franco, you want to come in after?
Please, yeah, a couple of
Okay,
comments.
after. Okay, Mohammed first.
Yeah, I just want to thank Kevin. His talk was very inspiring. And when we look back at our careers too, we can see your career as well was not all that plain sailing. You did not always have the wind in your favor, like many of us could, but it's very, very inspiring. And, it's what is very important there is that you give back what you give back to architecture. It's very important, and, we can learn lessons from you. And I must say, whenever I'm in your company, you make us feel like there is a sense of belonging. And that is very important. Keep up the good work, and well done. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mohammed. Skura, just to inform you, Mohammed was a first-term councillor with me and is now a very good friend. Lives in Cape Town, and we spent a lot of time with each other in hotels and at the airport.
Oh, yes.
Mohammed, thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Franco?
Well, I don't know what this Professor Friscuro is between colleagues here. Nonsense. Thanks for the enlightening talk, and I think it exposes a couple of very relevant points. The first one is that I do not believe that architectural education today, or in fact ever, has discussed, revealed the fact that architecture is an incredible profession, and it leads you up all sorts of paths and into all sorts of adventures. And I think that, I think that the way it is taught, it is almost like a course in accountancy, and that is where it ends, whereas architecture is just where it begins. And I think that your talk exposes very much of this. Thank you very much. The second point I'd like to make is the fact that, the question of, are we leaders in society? What is our role in society, and so on? And I think that once you start dealing with areas like development and community work and so on, and in our case, in fact, even straightforward politics, architects are politicians. They do not realize they are politicians. They don't realize that politically they're incredibly powerful. They deny it, in fact. They say, oh, no, I'm not in politics. I'm just getting on with design or whatever. Whereas the very fact that you are a job generator, you handle budgets, you handle projects, so you manage projects, which means then that you have decision-making ability, and that puts you in direct competition with people who are only engaged in community work, where somebody who's in the community or is a community leader, they walk the walk, they talk the talk, but they cannot implement projects. Architects walk the walk, talk the talk, and are able to put into place projects. And that puts them in direct competition at a community level with politicians. And that makes them extremely dangerous politically. And I think that, this is something that we have to realize. And sadly, we do not talk about this kind of thing in our educational process. There was a third point, but I've forgotten it now, getting old.
Thanks,
you.
Reka.
Franco, thank you. I'm glad to have you in. I know you've been trying to log in other talks and you weren't able to. Finally, you were. Thank you so much. Trish Emmett, I didn't notice you early on. Former UIA president has logged in. Thank you, Trish. I think I saw a comment by Nina. I don't know if she's still here. She's one of the people with Ivor Daniel who influenced me to start this volunteering thing that Kevin, you've been doing as well so well. I don't know if colleagues, any other comment for Kevin?
I have thought of my third point. May I make it still?
Okay, sure.
Okay. I think that Kevin's life experience demonstrates something else which is, again, not focused. And in my own personal experience, knowing people like, for example, Patrick Geddes, Revel Fox, Dennis Radford, and so on, it has always been that architects, I've forgotten it again, architects are incredibly versatile in their own work. They can lend their own design skills to all sorts of projects and all sorts of levels which are not explored. And I think that we should be exploring these things. And you'll find that as we project, as we go forward with these projects, we find that our own lives are enriched, yes. And we're able to then involve all sorts of people. We can touch all sorts of lives in the process. And I think that this is something that we should be aware of, and we're not being made aware of, possibly even in the after education process either. And I think that this is where Kevin's talk has been incredibly valuable. Thank you.
It has been. Thank you,
Thanks,
Frank.
If I can pick up, sorry, if I can just pick up on that point. I think and on Franco's point, that is, I think our role as mentors is often undervalued, I think, or knowing on how to guide new people. I have a massive advantage of having a young staff and being able to try and lead them through the pitfalls. Often when introduced to people, they ask what you do, and I say I'm a fireman, because literally you spend your life putting out fires, and I do very little architecture at the moment other than guiding. So in architecture, we have that opportunity to train people, and it's really finding one's own will to be able to guide. I think that's the important part. So just picking up on Franco's point, we have that leadership ability.
Kevin, also the fact that we are engaged in a multitude of other roles, often pro bono in society, means that we have an ability to, let me make it much simpler. Every single architect I've known who has been worth his salt or her salt as an architect has had a multitude of lives and has applied their skills to other social aspects of society. If you don't do that, if you don't join cultural societies, if you don't contribute to the cultural life of your community, you are not playing your full role as an architect.
Agreed, Franco. Thanks.
Thank you, Franco. So I think Kevin, one of the major aspects of your life, apart from just practice and being an academic, is advocacy, which is the architects or the politics of architecture. And I hope that we can learn today that the importance of being part of an organization like Saia, or Saia Kzn, UIA, AUA. Through UIA, you are part of the Canberra Accord, which has say in education, which has say in how people can work across the world. It's important for us to have representation in those forums. At the Africa Union of Architects, we're looking at work coming on the continent. And if you have to go work some of the practices on the log today, you will know that if you're working outside the country, you have to have a local architect. We are the only continent, I think, who has not been very firm in that. If you go, I mean, in the US, even the States are a bit different. We have not been that firm as a continent in that, and together with the AU as the Africa Union of Architects, that is much firmer, and that is through our South African Institute of Architects. And then through our region, we are able to work with NGOs in looking at housing typologies with different NGOs such as City People and Slum Dwellers International. So I think, Kevin, your presentation, more than your excellent work and your academia and other things that you have done, has demonstrated the importance of us volunteering and being part of these organizations for the betterment of our profession. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you all. And Skura, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah.
Nice to have you all with me.
Any last question from anyone? Everybody's covered.
Can I just add something for Kevin?
Yes, Tom.
Kevin, your life has been very exciting, and I think many people would envy what you've seen, what you've done, and also where you're going. It's quite incredible, and I like your analogy with the wind. You know, going through calm waters and going through stormy weather. And also for stormy weather, you have to tackle negatives and achieve things. And through the stormy weather and negative things, you've achieved so much. You're inspiration to many young people. Listening to you, inspiration for me. Listening to you, what you've done. Congratulations on behalf of all the Architects Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Very kind words. As many of you will know, Don, at his young age, still comes into the office often, and Don still practices architecture. So he's been a leading light to many people. We often have people come into the office, particularly when we were in the old office on the Brea, saying we use the architects for this project office opposite the Botanic Gardens. We'd like a building just like that one, and Don continues to put work out like it as well. So Don has been a leader to many as well. Although he drove me crazy in my younger days in the office, and drove many crazy. I know he's mellowed into this guide that we have been talking about. So thank you, Don, for all your inputs.
Yes, it was the refining fire at the start, Kevin. Thank you, Don, for always supporting our initiatives and events. Thank you. Colleagues, we've run over our time. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing. The next speaker, which will be our last speaker for the year on the 8th, will be Wally Peters. So it's a great progression. I think you've mentioned him quite a lot in your talk today. May everyone have a lovely weekend. See you again in 2 weeks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.
Thanks,
thank you,
guys.
Skura, and thank you, Kiara. Thanks, Harlesia.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
Cheers, everyone. Cheers.